Geoff Fienberg, who you pounding the table for this season?
For me, it is the overpaid and contract that was much maligned Christian Kirk, an ADP in the middle of the 10th round, might have been paid, overpaid, maybe responsible for a lot of things that happened subsequently, dominoes in the wide receiver market this past offseason. But the fact remains, Jacksonville has huge plans for him. And with Doug Peterson there, offensive-minded, a lot of us see huge leap, the big leap for Trevor Lawrence, year 1, year 2. Seems like a big bargain in the middle of the 10th round for me. Christian Kirk, Jacksonville Jaguars.
I like it. He's actually he's a big guy we talk about on the show. We're all fans here, so we like it.
Yeah, I mean, just I guess cheat and say I was debating between that and like standing in front of the Kadarius Toney bus in New York. He was so excellent in his limited healthy action last year. They improved the O-line. Things should be better. But there's just so many off-field questions. I'm worried like that'll sound so dumb in a few months. So safe bet, Christian Kirk. I think it's a real safe. You got to hit a nice double in the 10th round with Christian Kirk.
I like it. Let's start the show. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Most Accurate Podcast. Our normal and wonderful host, Brandon Niles, is on assignment this week. So I'm sliding over into those chair, and I'm joined, as usual, by my friend, Chris Allen. How are you, bud?
I'm doing great. I'm better since I'm not stuck hosting this show this week, and you were gracious enough to take on Brandon's job for today's episode. No, but I'm happy to be here for sure. I mean, we're in the thick of training camp now with getting actual news and things of that nature. So I'm excited to hear more. We've got actual football this week, right? Hall of Fame game Thursday, if I'm remembering correctly. So it's like, football is actually, it's here now. It's less about thinking or about when we're going to get news and any of that stuff. So I'm excited to actually see like real football. And also excited to talk with our guest today. Geoff, I've never had a chance to talk with you, interact with you. So I'm glad we get a chance to do it today. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Chris. Excited to chat with you. Have also never had a chance to talk to Jennifer.
Nope.
Been following her for a while, and I don't know, they obviously must trust you if they gave you the AFC West, Jennifer, because as for 2022, those are some big shoes that, you know, they didn't just say go talk about the AFC South while I'm not here this week. It is AFC West talk, so I appreciate you bringing me in.
No, actually, we're super psyched. I know you normally live in the golf world. You are part of the Mayo Media Net golf team there, and also part of our parent company, BetSperts. You've been doing a show with them as well on golf. So we're excited that you've humbled us with your presence in the football world to talk some AFC West from your beloved Chargers. So, you know, I think that before we get into it, we should also talk about, you know, drafting our Chargers and drafting all of our teams. I mean, I do live in Denver, so I like to draft the Broncos. We do have to talk about Underdog. Everyone out there, if you want to get in some best ball action, if you haven't gotten in on some best ball action, I don't know why you wouldn't, but let's, you know, people are still out there getting their feet wet coming back to football. We still have a really good promo at Underdog. If you deposit $10 into a brand new Underdog account, you get a deposit bonus match and a 4 for 4 pro subscription. So just enter 4 for 4 in the promo code box, the number 4 FOR, and then the number 4 in the promo code box to get a deposit match and a free pro subscription. So let's get into actual AFC West stuff. Chris, why don't you lead us off and talk some Chiefs?
Yeah, I know, Geoff, we brought you on because we know about your strong connection and familiarity with the Chargers, but we at least got to talk about the other teams like within the AFC West. And of course, one of the biggest, I guess, blocks to the Chargers getting into the playoffs would be the Chiefs this year. And I just want to get a temperature check just right off the top. I mean, what are your thoughts about Patrick Mahomes here in 2022? Because now he's without Tyreek Hill, arguably like their best weapon outside of Travis Kelce in the passing attack. How do you think they're going to operate like this season? Because we started to see, I'm not going to say a decline, like not at all in any way, shape, or form, but I would say just a change in how the Chiefs have approached their offense over the past like few seasons. Patrick Mahomes, his average depth of target has decreased. It's almost down 2 full yards from when he became the starter for Kansas City in 2018. It's down to about 7.6, 7.4 yards per attempt. Also, his deep ball rate has also decreased over the past few seasons as well. So they're already starting to limit the things that we expected Tyreek Hill to do, and now he's not even there. So how do you think, I mean, just like Patrick Mahomes is going to operate now without having, again, arguably one of the best wide receivers in football at the other end of his passes?
So as it pertains to the Chiefs, I'm like are probably the least bullish in the whole division on any individual player in terms of, their question marks as to who it's going to be. And maybe over investing in them is probably the move because someone's going to get the lion's share of it. That being said, I think they made the right move. I think this is going to show the player that they let go, if anyone, is the overrated player in all of this. I have no doubts they're going to continue to make the sausage, the music, whatever analogy you want to say, it's going to happen there. Like I'm convinced of that. The talks are of their demise in any way from someone in the AFC West is like laughable. They still might even start slow. Like I wouldn't put that past them either. Just like we saw the Patriots do time and time again. Now, the division is tough. Like the Patriots, there's 1 or 2 times the Jets were kind of there. Like when they did slip up, they had mulligans. Maybe someone in the division last year, no one was ready to take advantage of the Chiefs' early slip-ups. Maybe someone will be this year, but I'm still convinced they'll be there in the end. That being said, out of all the teams or players, team spotlight, it's the one where like I'm least bullish on any individual player, be it who's going to get the lion's share of a lot of the, be it the backs or the receivers. And I'm sure we'll get into it here briefly.
Yeah, and I think I'm with you on that as well, because over the years, it's been a much more concentrated offense. Like we had that star power up front because you had Tyreek Hill, you had Travis Kelce, and then even if you wanted to invest in any of the running backs, at least we knew that, well, if it was Williams, if it was CEH when he came onto the scene, at least they were attached to good offenses. So the logic behind drafting them at their cost, like all of that made sense. But again, now without Tyreek Hill, and Jen, I'm going to kick this question over to you. I'm with Geoff. It does become a little bit murkier in terms of figuring out who is going to get some of those targets, because at least in my mind, and this is the way I've been approaching it, is that we can like the Chiefs can recreate the function of Tyreek Hill on the field but it's going to take multiple players to do it. Like if you wanted Tyreek Hill out of the slot, okay, well, Juju Smith-Schuster can do most of that. Okay. And if you wanted Tyreek Hill, like the deep threat, all right, well, they got MVS. I mean, Mecole Hardman, I mean, he's at least fast. I don't know if he can catch the ball as often, but at least he's fast and he can draw some of that safety and like that deep defensive attention away from anything they want to run underneath, whether it's an ISO route to Travis Kelce or whatever the case may be. I mean, we've already been seeing highlights out of camp of Sky Moore getting more and more acclimated with Patrick Mahomes, establishing a rapport with him. So it's like they can recreate bits and pieces of what Tyreek Hill was like on the field. But from a fantasy perspective, that's now 3 people that are going to be getting those types of targets. It's not going to be one person anymore. And I'm not going to draft 3 Chiefs. So Jen, how are you approaching drafting any of the Kansas City players at this point?
It's tough. I mean, like you said, in order to make them all fantasy relevant, they're all going to have to be uber efficient, right? Because they're not going to get the amount of targets that you think they're going to get, right? Or that they need to get. So it's tough. I mean, if you're looking at ADP right now, I mean, Juju is he's going, his ADP right now is 54.3. And then there's a pretty decent jump down to MVS at 92 and Sky Moore at 98 and McCole Hardman. So for me, Juju's the most expensive. I'm sprinkling him in a little bit, but for the most part, I'm not really drafting that many. I've been really drafting more of on the running back, on the running backs, just because they're cheap, like McKinnon and Rojo are pretty cheap, so you can kind of grab that. It's a tough dichotomy, right? Because you want to take players on good offenses when it comes down to it, especially for best ball, just in case. But at the same time, you just don't know what this offense is going to look like. I will say, as far as Mahomes go, he seems to be dropping, and he's pretty cheap. So I have taken him at times just because he's there, and I'm like, why? I'm not going to let him fall to the 6th round here when there he is in the 5th, and I'm just going to grab him. Sure. But I haven't found myself taking a lot of Kelsey. He's pretty expensive still, and he makes me a little nervous. But overall, I've been avoiding Sky Moore. Of course, now the training camp hype has me a little peaked. Like maybe I should sprinkle some shares in, because I really have not drafted Sky Moore at all, because he was very expensive and then he got cheaper, and then now he's probably going to skyrocket again. So I don't know, to answer your question in a very roundabout way, I haven't really been investing too much, because like I said, I feel like with the amount of targets that these guys are going to get, they're going to have to be like on fire efficient. And we haven't seen that out of Nicole and MVS, and Juju, has been up and down as well.
All right, so I got a stat for you guys. Of course, if anybody's listened to the show before, they know that is typically my thing. The Chiefs last season, now they have been like from a passing standpoint, their pass rate over expectation, it's been in the top 5 like since Mahomes took over as the starting quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs, and so that the passing volume has always been there. But just last season alone, they had 15 different players get touches or get targets from within the 20-yard line. So within the red zone, 15 different players. The closest team was actually probably going to be, hopefully we see a rematch of it here in 2022, was the Bills at 13. But everybody else, all of the other playoff teams, Cincinnati had 10, San Francisco had 11, the Chargers had 11, the Rams had 10. Just think about all the wild stuff that Andy Reid thinks about or dreams about, or I have no idea like what he thinks of once they get into the red zone. Because think about all the random stuff. So what Travis Kelce lining up under center and then doing one of those, flip passes to a lineman or something like that in the end zone. We saw that happen so many times that we don't now. Without Tyreek Hill, who knows what's going to happen? We're probably going to see offensive linemen line up under center at some point. But I think just really I think your point, like both of your points, are very much like they're right in the sense that we need to see, or we'd have to expect some level of high-end efficiency like what Tyreek Hill had as a receiver in order for any of them to significantly pay off their ADP. Juju Smith-Schuster seems the safest just because he does run out of the slot, easier coverage, higher percentage targets for Mahomes. He targets the slot at, I think, over a quarter of his targets anyway, so it makes sense to target the guy that and also, if you want to look at the money, okay, fine. And again, if it's MVS, Mecole Hardman, more volatile targets that will be associated with them, whatever the case may be. It makes sense given their ADPs, like how we expect the targets to kind of work out. So I get that. But now let's shift our attention to the running back position. CEH, Ronald Jones, Jerick McKinnon's back. I'm hearing at least some good camp buzz about the Isaiah Pacheco. The short little speedster that they drafted just this past year. And even Derek Gore, I know they were in absolute blowouts. Derek Gore popping off for 50-yard touchdown runs last season. They have multiple options, and I'll keep Derek Gore out of the conversation right now, but at least 4 now with the buzz surrounding Pacheco. What are we supposed to do with the running backs at this point? This is a team that has been, last season, they were bottom 10 in just targets to the running back position. And that was CEH's calling card coming at LSU. So Geoff, over to you. Do you think that it's worth even trying to target a guy like Clyde Edwards-Helaire in drafts, just given, he's not going to be cheaper. 6th, 7th, 8th round for CEH on Underdog Fantasy right now. He's not going to get any cheaper, but is it worth it just given the context of this offense?
I have not taken him. I've had some opportunities where I've pivoted off of taking him. I do agree with Jen. It does feel like the cheapest, best way to get in on this thing is probably through Rojo and McKinnon. I don't know, like the the football, like you always want like some piece of like the Mahomes juice, the Reed juice. You don't know how it's going to come. You mentioned all those guys touching the ball. Makes your perception feel like reality because they do a bunch of crazy stuff down there. Even as someone like who likes to bet on first touchdown, like they're always, making sure it's not the obvious, choices with the weird stuff that they're capable of. I don't trust CEH. And yeah, if I wanted to get a little grease from this thing, it would be the second guys. But you hope if you still expect them to make their point totals similar to what they've been doing, then, just the sheer volume that they give you the opportunities kind of makes everyone worth it. I don't think I own a single Chief. I don't think I own a single one. Even, quickly to say on Kelsey, you've got to be in a hyper specific like spot in drafts, it seems like, to get him.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really been there much, but even when I have, I don't know. It's something that I haven't been attached to. I still think they're going to be great. I'm sitting on the fence as who's going to be great, but I'm just convinced the team's going to be great. And it's created a really weird dichotomy for me from a fantasy perspective.
And I 100% agree because a lot of folks right now, I think the hype surrounding Ronald Jones, I've seen it just more from the Best Ball Mania standpoint, the tournaments, because if you're going against a large field player pool or entry pool, and you're trying to figure out, okay, well, where can I harness the most upside, like out of this offense, like from their running attack? And CEH is probably going to be fine, but where can I harness like the most touchdowns out of this? And we've already seen them try to have Clyde Edwards-Helaire run up into that offensive line, bang off a couple of tackles, and then he doesn't wind up getting in. Where we've seen it, I mean, not necessarily to say that Ronald Jones has been better in that particular area, but at least we've seen him have power. We've seen him have speed, like in some spurts when he was still in Tampa. And especially given the difference in cost between the two, there is at least some justification for folks wanting to draft him. I'll take the bet that for a multi-round discount, I can get most of Clyde Edwards-Helaire's fantasy production with Ronald Jones. If Ronald Jones winds up being the one that they use once they get inside the 20s. Because just last season, both CEH and Darrell Williams were in the top 10 in success rate. That was according to Football Outsiders. But neither of the two could crack the top 50 in terms of breakaway runs. This is a team that's predicated on explosives, but all of those explosive plays come from Patrick Mahomes' arm. They need to be able to generate similar types of plays like on the ground. They just haven't been able to do it. Maybe this Pacheco kid can do it. Maybe they're expecting Ronald Jones to do it, because I think some of the highlights from Ronald Jones, like his best games, like with Tampa, was when he was breaking off some long runs here and there. So I think it's possible. But Jen, over to you. I mean, have you been targeting any of these guys? I mean, it's too much murk for me. I might take CEH here and there just because I've been stubborn and trying to recoup my losses from drafting CEH in the first and second round 2 years ago. But I get the consternation behind trying to do it in 2022. I completely understand it. But where are you at with the running backs?
Yeah, no, I'm not drafting CEH. I just can't. I mean, I don't know if it's a PTSD.
Not Jennifer.
I actually didn't. No, it's not Jennifer at all. I did not. I didn't get burned on him though, because I didn't invest in him heavily last year either. So no, I mean, like I said earlier, I've got a little bit of Rojo, a little bit of McKinnon. I'll probably grab some Pacheco now that that's kind of a thing. All right, let's move on, because we're supposed to brief, right, Chris? Brief.
Yep.
for the first three teams.
Yeah.
That did not happen. So we're going to go brief here. We're going to move on to my hometown, Denver Broncos. Another, legit contender in the AFC West. Actually, they're all contenders this year, which is pretty scary. But yeah, I mean, the Broncos are in a situation where we're looking at, new coaching staff, brand new fresh quarterback. Old Russ is in town. So Russ right now is QB8 on Underdog. I'm curious, Geoff, how do you feel about that? Do you feel like he's appropriately priced? I feel like he's QB8, but I feel like I've seen him slip too. I feel like people have been grabbing other quarterbacks ahead of him, like Rodgers and Stafford and those guys. And how do you feel about Russ? How do you feel like he's going to fit in Denver? And how do you feel about his fantasy outlook for 2022?
I think 8 is appropriate. that's probably exactly where I would have him ranked. That like a lot of these higher end veteran quarterbacks have gone on and moved and won Super Bowls, and even the lower tier veteran quarterback like my guy Phillip Rivers was even able to move over, play 1 year, get Indianapolis into the playoffs. So it's hard to fathom like Russell not having success, like him being the veteran QB that sort of ends this streak in this current era of way more veteran QB movement than we're used to. Really don't see him being like the outlier and failing. Even with Nathaniel Hackett, who even got the best at Aaron Rodgers the last couple years. So I'm afraid as a Charger fan that, this will be really annoying for me.
Well, you're used to a complete carousel of crap that has come in and out of Denver over the last, several to 5 to 6 years.
Chargers. Even your bigger loser quarterbacks pulled off a win against the Chargers, I promise.
It's been ugly. It's been a carousel of crap, as I said. So it's nice to have, an able body in here that has been successful in the league. And, we'll see if we get what if they're going to let Russ cook, if they're going to let Russ run, all that stuff. Chris, anything to say on the subject? Are you down with Russ? Are you not down with Russ?
Absolutely, I'm down with Russ.
Okay.
I think stylistically he fits. I think he fits like what Nathaniel Hackett at least has tried to implement in the past. We saw Aaron Rodgers. I wouldn't attribute all of Aaron Rodgers, let's say, rejuvenation and essentially what his back-to-back like MVP campaigns like to Hackett. It's more of also the combination.
It's about his sex life, Chris. We know that.
Well,
right?
That too. I mean, and that badass tattoo that he got on his forearm too, man. That also has to go with it as well. And Rusta definitely didn't have one of those. Doesn't seem like a tattoo guy.
No, definitely not.
He's as square as they come. But yes. I think the big thing though is like what Hackett asked of Aaron Rodgers and where Russ is at in his career. And I think development wise, like he can do most of the things that Hackett like implemented or at least wanted to implement with Rodgers. And of course, the deep ball should definitely be there and Russ has been like one of the most accurate quarterbacks, like from a deep percentage perspective for the past like 3 to 4 seasons, minus obviously last year when everything fell apart with the finger inching, blah, blah, blah. So no, I'm 100% in on him, at least getting back to, let's say, early 2020-ish time frame, like about that, like for where Russ can be at for his, at least his ceiling, like for this particular offense, especially given the weapons around him.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm excited about Russ, and I seem to have quite a bit of him. He just seems to fall to me in drafts, and I'm not complaining about that. Let's go on to his weaponry. So we've got Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick. Tim Patrick has been the fantasy leader over the last 2 seasons in that offense. Obviously, there were issues with Sutton and Jeudy as far as injuries and whatnot. With all three presumably healthy. Looking right now at their ADP, right now Jeudy is going at 48.6, Sutton is going at 36.6, so there's like a 10-spot difference between those two. Tim Patrick all the way down at 116.8. I am personally all over Tim Patrick at that ADP. I try to get him as much as I can. Geoff, are you in the camp of Jeudy, of Sutton, of neither? How are you feeling?
So if you needed off the top the bang the drum to be AFC West specific, I probably would have tried not to make that a Charger, and it likely would have been Tim Patrick. That's who I would have made it at that ADP you mentioned. Bridgewater couldn't get the best out of him, nor could Locke. I think there's tremendous value and opportunity in Tim Patrick under a Russell Wilson, Nathaniel Hackett offense. No doubt, I see what people see in the ceilings when they draft or talk or hype a Sutton or a Jeudy. But Tim Patrick, if I'm going to bang the table for one of these guys, it's him.
Yeah, I agree. You can't beat his price tag, and I think Jeudy and Sutton were kind of similar, and then they've started to separate a bit as far as ADP goes. Chris, are you in the camp of either of those, or are you punt and wait for Patrick?
At least I have to talk myself into taking Judy. I still believe in the talent because looking at his rookie season, he was actually one of the best like separators according to Matt Harmon's reception perception, 71st, 72nd percentile in terms of success rate against like man coverage. And so that was at least the hope that he would continue to do that, but he completely fell off in his second season. But I think part of that was because of a role change. Like he was in the slot. I mean, he primarily played outside his rookie season, moved into the interior last year. I think he played almost like 2/3 of his snaps like inside. And so if Tim Patrick is the one that plays more on the interior, which I think that suits Patrick at this point. I think he's better suited for that type of role. I would liken him to what the Packers ask of Alan Lazard, like more of like the dirty work interior guy to help with run blocking. I think that's what Tim Patrick will be. If they push Judy back out to the outside, he actually, some reports talking about like he might not have been concentrating as much as he should have, like when he was out there practicing and whatnot. If that also tightens up too, he can be the receiver that he was back in his rookie season. But I'm just having to talk myself into it more so than believing in that fact. So, or believing in that idea rather. So I'm on Jerry Jeudy, but I can see why folks would want to draft Tim Patrick more.
No, I agree. And there's also, I mean, we can't, we have to talk about KJ Hamler just because he is in the mix and he's dirt cheap too. And, he has injury concerns, but, because I do live here and I see a lot of local stuff, he has been impressive at camp so far as well. So there's a dart throw for you for those of you out there that are either worried about Hamler or aren't able to get a guy that, Patrick or someone else that you wanted. I'm kind of annoyed in Scott Fishbowl because I should have taken Hamler and I did not because I have Russ and I missed out on Tim Patrick. That's a whole other story. In order to keep it brief, I guess, do we need to talk about Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams? I mean, I feel like they've been talked about a lot. I don't know. I guess we could talk about them. Their ADPs are drastically different. Javonte has moved down a little bit. He was, actually at the beginning of the summer, he was an early or late first to early second rounder. Once they signed Gordon, he has now slipped a little bit or more than a little bit, couple rounds. Do either of you have, Geoff, you have any specific feelings on these guys or?
Nothing. I don't really feel that emboldened about any of them to make a case or hate on either.
That's fair. Chris?
They're both good. Draft them both if you can.
Cool.
Yeah, last thing
I'll talk about real quick, just because there is camp buzz and whatnot, is the tight end. We've got Alberto. We've got Greg Dulcich. I think that, I don't know, it's tough. It's tough to tell if training camp hype, right? We all know that rookie tight ends rarely pan out for fantasy purposes. That is well documented, data to back all that up. But there has been a lot of talk about Greg Dulcich this entire offseason, even before camp started. So, I've backed off. I really didn't draft a lot of Alberto over the offseason. And Greg Dulcich at the moment is still pretty cheap. So, I like him. I don't know if it's going to pan out or not. Obviously, in redraft, I'm not going to, I probably won't be drafting either of those guys in redraft, to be honest. But as far as a best ball standpoint, I'm trying to get a couple shares in there of Dulcich just in case. He has those spike weeks. He may, have 1 3-touchdown week or something. Who knows? Geoff, have any strong feelings about these tight ends? Are you avoiding? Are you in?
I like Alberto, and I've gotten into the hype of Dulcich, and I, even saw some of the post-draft like Broncos specific content that they put out, and saw really how excited they were to get him in there. But like redraft on my mind, I don't know. I'd have to be in a real weird, deep, desperate spot, right, I think, to commit to either. So it's nothing I've honestly followed that closely. I'm a fan of both. I think Hackett will probably find a way to utilize them both. I'm probably like the Broncos. They got like a big primetime game week 1. No, I think they're wrong.
I think they're playing Seattle, actually. I think it's
yeah. I'm gonna bet. I probably, whichever one is like tight end 1 or the hype that week, I'm probably gonna bet to score the first touchdown in that game.
Okay.
I'm not anti them, but like I'll commit to. I'll make my decisions on them in like different ways.
Okay.
First touchdown, Bronco bets. Happy to back whichever tight end Russ will be cooking up with.
I like it. Chris, any strong feelings about the tight end position in Denver?
No, not particularly. I think it's more of what does your build look like if you're looking at it from a best ball standpoint, because I'd be fine with possibly doing a 2 tight end build, let's say with Albert O and insert like one of like the top 6 or top 8 tight ends,
Right.
depending on like bye weeks. But I've started to mix in Greg Dulcich like in like 3 tight end builds. So if I take like, let's say Dawson Knox as my first tight end, and then let's say anybody in the Irv Smith to Robert Tunyon tier for my second, and then I'll throw in a guy like Dulcich on the back end of that.
I just not to pick on Dulcich, because I do believe where he was drafted, there's probably more to it than a lot of the stuff we'll see. But like in 3 weeks from now, people are gonna laugh at the takes that happen like this week.
Of course.
First week with depth charts, like you're gonna laugh so hard at some of like the picks you make this week and the drastic changes. So
absolutely.
I got no, you gotta, it's I don't want to say a little more complicated, but there's so much nonsense and noise that we're gonna just okay.
I mean, prime example is Jacob Harris from last year. I bought all the hype, and then he ended up being, and I've seen the hype again. I'm like, nope, I am not.
And it doesn't take long. It's like 17 days later, and it's over.
Yep.
Like, yeah,
absolutely. All right, let's move on to the stupid Raiders. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Now you said that because
I'm kidding. But Chris, why don't you take this one?
I've only got one question about the Raiders, and then we can get on to the Chargers, because that's a much more interesting prospect, like just from the skill position players, the quarterback, and so on and so forth. But Geoff, what are your feelings surrounding Derek Carr? Like, not even just like for 2022, but just in general, because I've heard, I don't know, like I've heard like a mix. Like he could be the guy. I mean, I would say in terms of franchise quarterback rankings, I'd say, above average, but he's also the guy that if he's feeling pressure, he throws the ball in the dirt. I mean, of course, it was great that he was able to pilot the team to a playoff win, especially after just all the craziness that surrounded the Raiders last year, from the Gruden stuff, to Henry Ruggs. I mean, all of the things that happened to them that just, what's your take on Derek Carr at this point in his career?
It's not that positive. It's not close to like some of the ceiling Derek Carr takes.
Mm-hmm.
It's exactly what you think he is. He's capable of winning a big game. It's pathetic the Chargers let him whatever that last game. So annoying. So it's hard for me to bash him because I take the crow. The Chargers couldn't even beat the guy, and I guess that's true. I just think I know what his ceiling is, and that's not something I want. And the Bengals, they gave that game on a platter to Derek Carr, and he didn't take advantage. They didn't take advantage. Some bad calls, some weird things, but Bengals, and sometimes it takes a bad win to get that ball rolling for them, and who gives a crap? They went to the bowl, but they played horrible in that one, and Derek Carr couldn't do anything to take advantage of that. He's properly rated 14th to 16th best quarterback in the league, in my opinion. Some people could say that's harsh. To put it quickly, I'd way rather Kirk Cousins. Like, I don't know if that's a way to just analyze Derek Carr, but I'd rather Kirk Cousins. So I don't know if that says enough or says a little, but
I think that says everything, to be quite honest, because if you think about just the highs for Derek Carr have just been just like these small moments in time, like where he might pop up for a big play. And of course they were able to the playoffs, but like you mentioned, they couldn't get it done despite the fact that, I mean, they really had it. I mean, it came down to the wire. I mean, even with the Tyler Boyd, like phantom touchdown that happened, which, I mean, again, I'm a Cincinnati fan, so like, I'm glad at the result, but still it's just like, they could have won that particular game. And I'm 100% with you, but Kirk Cousins' highs have been so much higher. Like we have, even with, I mean, of course you can probably make the case that, well, Kirk Cousins has Justin Jefferson, and now Derek Carr has Devontae Adams, but he hasn't really had that type of receiver, that type of weaponry at his disposal throughout his career. I mean, okay, fine. I mean, but Jen, for you, I mean, what's your temperature check like when it comes to Derek Carr? I mean, he's been efficient. I mean, from an EPA per play standpoint, he's been average to above average, like close to the top 12, like since 2018. Completion percentage over expected, he's been like top 6, top 7. But it's just he's not throwing any touchdowns. He hasn't thrown more than 30 touchdowns like since 2015 or 2016. So it's like he's not producing from a fantasy standpoint. So it's like I get the sentiment around him just being essentially what are Andy Dalton at this point, for lack of a better term, for lack of a better comparison. But where are you at with him?
I think I'm a little more positive than you guys are with him. I mean, it's interesting that Geoff brought up Kirk Cousins because I feel like it's a similar situation. It's like, okay, so we're drafting Davante Adams in the first round, but yet, and it was kind of like last year with Kirk Cousins where everyone was drafting Jefferson and then Thielen and then no one was drafting Kirk Cousins. And it's like, we have to so I have been drafting Derek Carr. I mean, I'm not like targeting him and gunning for him. I would think in redraft, I probably won't have much of him, but I think in best ball, for where his price is and he's easy to stack with, Adams. So I've done it. And I think Darren Waller is actually pretty cheap this season too, because a lot of people have recency bias there. So I don't dislike Derek Carr. Like I said, he's not someone that I'm actively seeking out, and I'm like, sweet, I want some of that Derek Carr action. But I think if he falls to me in best ball, like I'll take him. That's kind of.
And I would follow up other I would want Davante Adams in the first round. I still think that rate is fair. I want to own Waller or Hunter Renfrow if they fall to me in the right spot and redraft. Like I wouldn't hesitate for a second to invest in one of their players. He's good enough that like everything that those guys do, he can still allow them to do. I just don't want. I don't know. I'm just not that interested in him, despite having no problem taking his 3 main targets with a smile on my face. So weird, but
I get that.
Yeah, something's got to give. If I like the targets, I'm just not there. And maybe my initial take was like more of an outside of a fantasy take, because obviously you can see how a fantasy perspective he's set up to have a great fantasy year and could even be a nice little cheap alternative in redrafts from a QB1 situation.
Without a doubt. And I think that, but your point is well taken, Geoff, in the fact that, like we want all their targets. From Adams to Renfrow to Waller. I mean, shoot, with Josh McDaniels under there, we could probably see the running backs also getting involved as well. I mean, maybe not Josh Jacobs, Kenyon Drake. There have been reports out of training camp already talking about Kenyon Drake, taking targets out of the backfield. Zamir White, even though he missed practice, multiple practices just last week for an unexplained absence, and they're downplaying the significance of that, but who knows? But it's just this offense could be more efficient, and that especially in the red zone, which has really been Carr's biggest bugaboo. He's been 24th in PA per play once they get into the red zone. So hopefully that is what kind of propels him into at least more fantasy relevance, because I'm with you guys. I would probably be fine, especially in best ball, if I can get Tom Brady, Russell Wilson, any of those top 6, top 8 options. Pairing him with Derek Carr, I think, is just it's a very optimal way to build out your roster without having to invest a ton of draft capital into the quarterback position. And their targets are so affordable at this point, outside of Adams, right? Because you have to be in the right draft spot in order to get him. But everybody else, absolutely. And of course, for the Week 17 bros that are talking about correlation, San Francisco, that defense, while still well coached, I don't know if the personnel is going to be there in order to actually keep that defense rolling as it did last season. So that Week 17 matchup, Raiders versus San Francisco, it could be a good one to target from a fantasy standpoint. So overall, I mean, I do agree that the pieces are good. Derek Carr, he could be that guy for this season. We just haven't seen him put it all together yet.
And before we close on the Raiders, and I've been very kind to the Chiefs and even the Broncos, I just need to put it out there that, in my opinion, I was proven wrong, and that Week 17 still. In my opinion, they overachieved so much last year, and if you look at some of the metrics, the one score wins or the close wins, the wins as underdogs. I think that would show that. So even if they really do improve, I could still see them being in the exact same spot, because I think last year they won so many more games than they probably should have. And I know that could sound blasphemy coming from me, but that's how I feel about it.
No, I'm with you. That's why I called them the stupid Raiders when we started the segment. I'm right there with you. All right, I think it's time we move on to the main focus of the night, which is the Los Angeles Chargers, which is really weird still. I mean, I don't, how many seasons in are we that they're in LA, and it just doesn't really make sense to me.
Not San Diego.
Yeah, it just doesn't. It's just not right. I want to share one thing real quick before we get into the actual team. I have this personal story that I need to share real quick. I don't know how, Geoff, I'm sure, I assume you're younger than me because everybody is in this space. But when I was a kid, I grew up in Miami. And when I was a kid, we used to come out to Colorado every holiday, every Christmas holiday break. And I don't remember what year it was. I should have looked this up before the podcast. But the playoff game between the Chargers and the Dolphins, we were on a plane. And it was my family and a bunch of other families all from Florida. And we convinced the pilot to have the playoff game on the loudspeaker. The entire plane was watching the game. Flipping Dan Fouts pulls off this ridiculous. It was a horrible, horrible, crushing loss. That was my childhood. And I've always hated the Chargers from then. I was probably, I was single digit years old during that playoff game. And it stayed with me my whole life. But I will say now, as an adult in this space, I do. I really like this team. I think they're exciting. I think they're up and coming, obviously, and they are exciting to watch. So I've tried to put that little childhood trauma aside and to move on and have some affinity for the Chargers. So now we can get into the actual. Well, first of all, actually, before we do that too, Geoff, you are Canadian, correct?
Yeah.
So where did your Chargers fandom come from?
Oh yeah, that's interesting.
Well, quickly, it's hard to, who can hate the Chargers? They've never harmed anybody. They're a guy you want to have at the party. He's gonna make a scene, do some amazing things, and then flame out hard, and you get to go home laughing at him. We're just the Lions with nicer weather, or the Bills before they won, with a good quarterback that won playoff games, a few of them, who I love. My fandom is, I'm from Canada, from Toronto, born and raised. My grandfather retired, moved out to Southern California, San Diego. You're just 9, 8, 10 years old. Go visit them, like you just mentioned, holidays, Christmas. And, we didn't have a team here in Canada. We still don't. And I don't, the Bills were winning. So it would have been the natural thing to do would be to bandwagon, really like the team when you're 7 years old that's really good and has all these stars and going to Super Bowls. But I didn't. There was something about it. Either where I'm from, you either go Bills or you go totally random. My friend group, very random teams, because you just kind of had to pick them. So when it was time to, when I realized I liked football more than even hockey and the Leafs, well, I had a Charger hat. I had a Seau jersey. I'd already been to games on visiting on Christmas, so it was kind of just easy. I'm a Charger fan, and I joked that I wish my grandfather retired in Green Bay, or Pittsburgh. I'd been a lot happier. Obviously, no, that's no one's ever gonna go move to those places, in their glory years. But so I just love it. And that's all. That's really nothing to it. And
listen,
I love football so much. You only need the germ, and here we are all these years later. And outside of goodwill for my friends and family, there's nothing I want more than for them to flip the switch finally the other way.
Right.
Well, we get that. Chris gets that. He's a Bengals fan, so he understands
the
switch that way. But as far as the Chargers go, what should we talk about here? What do you want to talk about? I mean, obviously, we'd like to know, they've made some improvements on the O-line. They brought in Gerald Everett. They've got some defensive improvements as well. Do you feel some sort of leap this year? Do you feel like they'll be able to finish? What are your feelings overall on the team? And then we can talk a little bit about the fantasy components as well.
Yeah, I mean, could argue it anywhere. I could tell you why they'll be horrible. I could tell you why they'll be great.
That's why we had you on here.
I really do believe it is time. I believe it is time. All things are there for this to be a nice run of Chargers football. The roster is fantastic. I think people give Staley a really hard time. The defense was abysmal. Like, I think a lot of the decisions he's gotten maligned for just stem from a defense you can't trust, and him having the balls to just say, I trust these guys. That's who I want. Could never get off the field on third down. Points per loud, they're like 29th. Run defense, first down run defense. It was horrible. So I guess my biggest question as a fan, like holistically in some ways, is I'm wondering if they'll still be the fourth downs, like a lot of, we see the trend up in the whole league. But if this is a defense they can trust and that they can just punt the ball and know that they can get it back, I think we'll see a little less of the like craziness. I think. So that's what I would say. And I think there's depth on the team and another plug and play offensive lineman. They know as long as they protect Herbert, he's so talented, he'll make other players stars. People wanted them to invest in that wide receiver pool in the draft, which would have been fun and sexy conversation for us. They're like, no, Justin Herbert's going to make other people stars. In the same way, Aaron Rodgers made other people stars. Patrick Mahomes makes other people stars. And Josh Allen will, make a handful of mid-level receiver stars like Brady and Manning did too. Well, the Bengals are such a talented receiving core, but if they didn't, I'm certain that Joe Burrow would turn the less talented players into stars also. I could talk a mile a minute about them, but yeah, so my expectations are high, which just means the crash is going to be that much harder, guys. And you'll all giggle. But I'm a true believer in Staley. I will close by this. I'm a disciple. I'm a believer. I love just listening to him speak. After a win, after a loss, like every word, I love it. But if somehow they botch this thing this year, someone's got to walk the plank for 2 years of burning year 2 and 3 of Herbert. So I guess, yeah, and we can move on to fantasy now.
When we do get to a fantasy,
you can move anywhere you want. I do this all day.
No, so from a fantasy perspective, right? You've got Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, very similar in ADP. You can't get both, right? Based on where your draft spot is, you can't draft both. You're there. You're on the clock. Which one are you taking, Geoff?
I would wish someone else is picking in front of me because I have a feeling like the layman will probably take Keenan Allen, but I think this is the year we do see a bit of a flip. And I don't want to get into the deep contract stuff, but put this out there right now because you give me one more chance. Are we live?
No.
Oh, I was gonna say tomorrow. Oh, I'm just gonna date it. Tomorrow, you guys will know, and then you can cut it. I've done this one time already. And I've been wrong in training camp, and this will be the last time I do it. If I'm wrong on this call, I'm gonna not do it again. Derwin James signs tomorrow. His long-term year extension. I don't even know if it's a hot take, but on the Tuesday, August 2nd, Derwin James is signing. Now I can get back to, I would take Mike Williams. I think this could, dare I say it, you hate to have to look into the future about these things. This could be Allen's last year with the team. I don't want to get into that deep place, but yeah, I think Williams surpasses him. I think they get way more aggressive on first down passing this year in the intermediate deep range. Something Joe Lombardi's got to realize, like, he doesn't have old Drew Brees right now. Like, you can unleash first down. And that's Mike Williams. I don't know if you say their ADP is close. I still feel like I expect Keenan to go ahead of him, but I pick Williams.
Chris, what are you doing? You're on the clock. You've got same both those guys.
I'm stubborn and I still take Keenan Allen, but I get it. I 100% get it.
But I'm like the guy from a golf point, sort of cut you off, Chris. I like bet on guys who like never win tournaments at the same price as guys that like have so many wins. And this, you'd feel so stupid. Like, you know how dumb you will feel if you draft Williams in front of Keenan and then this year's the status quo?
Right.
Like, for peace of mind, part of me would have to say Keenan, and you just said, like, I'm just going back to old Yeller. Like, how could you not?
Right. Yeah.
I'll feel so dumb to think that I doubted this or felt this flop, but yeah.
Well, I mean, they're right now, Keenan is wide receiver 12 and Mike Williams is wide receiver 14. I mean, they are that close. So it's not that crazy to flip-flop them and take one over the other. I'm sure it's being done. You know, so, you know, that is happening. So if we move on to the next section or the next tier, I guess, are you a Josh Palmer guy, a Guyton? Are you, Palmer?
Yeah, big. And that's also, like, I'm a Charger guy, so I'm biased. And he's from like 25 minutes up the road from me,
nice.
Josh Palmer.
Okay.
So that's like when the Chargers go Canadian in the draft, like that guy's, you know, he's going to just have my support. I think we're in for Josh Palmer's season, 3rd round pick last year. One of the main reasons or any of sort of talk about the Chargers investing into that wide receiver market in this year's draft were quelled. Like, no, they really do like Josh Palmer. You saw trust with him and Herbert developing, Herbert even going to him in some clutch situations, him starting ahead of Guyton. I get why it's like sort of made some news because the Chargers are such an offense people are going to want to invest in. You're still going to want to own the 3rd receiver who's not going to want to go into their, you know, into their seasonal drafts this year wanting like that Chargers 3rd receiver as late as they can get it. It's going to be Josh Palmer, friends. It's gonna. Yeah, it's gonna.
I like to hear that because that's who I've been drafting there. You know, a lot of him.
They really like him a lot.
Yeah,
he's
a 12.
Daily camp reports like a lot. So it's all matched up with the positioning. I do not believe that's going to be an ADP people giggle at in 3 weeks from now. I do not.
Nope. Agree.
Perfect. Well, he's a 12th rounder, so you can get it still pretty cheap. It'll probably rise. I guess we should move to running back. I mean, where do you feel, Geoff, the split will come between Eckler and Spiller? I know Spiller, I've seen as well. There's been some good training camp stuff surrounding him as well. They seem happy with it. I think today I saw something that he was running a little bit with the ones. So where do you see that playing out as far as their split and how, you know, when, or should we invest in Spiller, you know, based on where he's being drafted, which I'll look real quick while you talk.
Yeah, so if you said we want you to bang the table and we want it to be a Charger, it would be Isaiah Spiller. And that's not an indictment on Austin Eckler, who I can hope in redraft leagues. I so badly think I want him, or, you know, in my, you know, home league to get the pick that will allow me to get Eckler. But as camp has started, and I've really started to sort of zone in on this team, guys, gals, if I could promise you one thing more than anything about this Charger segment, it is that the Chargers, the coaches, the organization, probably even Austin Eckler himself, want nothing more. They are so desperate to find this complimentary running back.
Yeah.
They tried a couple years ago with Kelly in the 3rd. Still feels like an epic fail. Rotating in bodies in last year. Just like, we know Eckler's great. The Chargers know Eckler's great. He does everything, but he's tiny. The season is 17 games. They know so badly how much they need a complimentary back. And this guy, by the college football lovers, say he can do it all. So I'm as bullish on him from like a ADP value, cashing in on it. There'll be days where him and Eckler gets his standard points and Spiller comes in and does his, and the people who own Eckler aren't even mad. They got so many points already that day. In the Chargers' dream, this split is as big as it can possibly be, like, relatively speaking. If that makes, you know, like, they don't want 50-50. It's freaking Austin Eckler. He's going to be a top 5 redraft. But they really do want it as big as they can squeeze out of it. I mean that. They're desperate for it to be as big as possible. Draft Spiller.
I like it. Chris, are you going to sprinkle in any Roundtree or Kelly or any of that? Or are you now pure Spiller based on this whole conversation and before?
Oh, I was all in on Spiller beforehand.
Yeah, no, I know you were.
Yeah, I know folks might just point to the draft cap and be like, oh, a 4th round running back. Like, no, it doesn't matter. Like, I think Geoff hit the nail on the head. I mean, there have been multiple press conferences and just multiple reports and just sound bites of not just Brandon Staley, like even Austin Eckler himself saying that they've been looking for this type of complimentary back to go along with Austin Eckler. Eckler knows. I mean, when he came out, and I mean, he also didn't have significant draft capital. So like his own story, like he knows that his, let's say, ability to actually generate like the amount of like the contract that he was able to get is just so difficult. And for him to even think about trying to do this again, if at all possible, or even extension, he needs to be able to stay on the field. And I know the Chargers want him. They love him. And Geoff can attest to this. But there's no way they're going to be able to keep him healthy without having like somebody alongside of him in order to like essentially be, if they were able to somehow bring like Melvin Gordon like back into the fold, like they need that type of back in order to take that load. Like I thought that could too, and I would have loved to have seen it.
History there with
me
and Melvin specifically. Humble enough on the one. That go to a list that whatever. Had he come back, it would have been open arms because he would have represented something they so desperately need.
Yes.
And again, like it's not even like Eckler. Eckler so badly wants someone to be good behind him. Like I've used the word so many times, it'll be the last time I'll do it. Whether it is Spiller or someone else, it clearly seems like it will be Spiller. They invested a draft pick in him. Seems to have the multi-purpose talent of running and catching. They're desperate for a legitimate RB2. I'll say people get mad at that. I don't care. I'll be there longer than Spiller. Like it will, whatever. If they have to do the rotating monster for RB2 again, it's going to really screw the season. Again, they're desperate for him to work, and it's a good offense. You should really want to own him. Maybe it gets to a point in September where he's getting so high in ADP that's like, no, I'm just got to back off now. That could happen because I think everyone plays fantasy football, and there's going to be a consciousness of what I'm saying later in August of how truly, and it might even affect how hype Eckler is when people truly grasp the desperation of the Chargers to cut into this workload.
Right.
It could affect his drafts that like him going super. Maybe he falls back a couple picks because it's going to be so clear there's a split coming.
That's exciting. It's exciting for you as a fan, and it's exciting for those of us in the fantasy world. Because as we always say on this podcast, the less murk in backfields, the better for fantasy purposes. One last thing before we go. I don't know if we even need to talk about Everett. He's super cheap, so I've been scooping him up everywhere because I don't know how you don't. I don't know why people aren't drafting him. I don't know why he's so cheap. I've been drafting him. You guys have anything to say about Everett?
Take him if you can.
Yeah.
I like Parham too. People who follow me know I'm like but there's still like Everett has to have a role. There's still developmental parts of Parham. And I guess with Everett, there's still a bit of a ceiling. Like you think that there's like, we haven't seen the best and maybe Herbert could bring out the best. Sort of like annoyed Evan Ingram fans. There have been some Everett drops. Like, I'm just even reading them bother me. Because like, I don't know. I loved Antonio Gates for obvious reason. And I overdrafted the shit out of Hunter Henry. Disappointed, like didn't work out as a Charger. I loved him too. I'm so desperate for them to like find someone who can be a seam breaker, for lack of a better term. If Everett is it, then explosion season, friends.
Yeah.
Love it. All right, let's wrap this sucker up. And we actually did it just under an hour, which is not too bad. Once again, thank you guys for listening to the podcast. Thank you, Geoff and Chris. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at Chris Allen FFWX, at G Fienberg 17, and at the Monday Mommy. Thanks you guys for listening and have a wonderful evening or day.